Oh, turn off that preview, and here we go. It's Monday, November 23rd, 2020. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight we are talking about displays. So, as you all know, because I talk about it a lot, I have two of the same smartphone, and the one I had for a long time started to wear out, so I started migrating everything to the new one. And the most annoying thing about migrating from any smartphone to any other smartphone is resetting up all your two-factor nonsense on the new phone.
Exactly. So just so people are, if you don't know, we did do a show on two-factor authentication, but the most common two-factor authentication method, the one you're used to with Google Authenticator app or whatever it is you use,
TOTP.
is called TOTP. And the way it works is it's a time-based one-time pad. You have a private secret key, a number, that is in your phone and nowhere else, right? So it's effectively, it could be something you know, someone could know the number, but really it's a thing you have because it's written down in the phone's memory in a special place. If you have an iPhone, at least they have that secure enclave or whatever. And then it's nowhere else in the world, and there's no way to read it out. Like there is no function that will get the app to read that number and tell it to anything else.
Yep.
So it's stuck there. And then using that secret number and the current time, it generates codes, and no one else could generate those codes so when you send those codes to the other computer, they know what time it is because they're also a computer. And they say, well, they know mathematically that they don't know your private key. They only know the public one. The public one can't be used to generate keys, but it can be used to verify keys. So basically, you tell them a number that you made using the private key and the time. They look at that number and they look at what time it is and they say, aha, only someone who has the private key would be able to guess this exact number. It's a 1 in a million chance. It's 6 digits. It's not right. They're not going to let you guess a million
you've got
guesses.
6 or 30. So it depends. There's different schemes on how many seconds. I forget how many seconds the default is.
You can divide the time up however you want. It doesn't matter, right? The point is you don't, even if somebody could guess a million times, the system that's having you log in, like Google, if someone tries to guess, more than 10 codes, it's like, yeah, you've had enough. It's like, we're not going to let you guess a million times, even if you could generate all million guesses that quickly. So
now some services.
The problem is, right, you switch services. You have to get a new phone. There's no way to read the private key out of phone A and put it into phone B. It's stuck there.
Because if you could do that, that actually creates a problem. Now, I noticed my Google Auth app, which I deprecated, like I don't use it anymore, but I noticed it has like an export function now.
Mine doesn't.
It appeared that I'd never noticed before.
Be Android only.
I'm actually restarting my phone to look at it again because I noticed it. I wasn't sure what it did, but it appeared that it would give me QR codes.
The iOS one does not have that. Only the Android one.
Yep. So I might have been able to actually migrate from one to the other. But what annoys me is that well-made services, I don't have many of these problems because they actually let you configure multiple TOTP authenticators for the same service. You could and give them names, or even let you have multiple options, like have a key or your thing. Like you can set up stuff, but a lot of people
you just don't want phone to be one of your options.
Yep, but a lot of services only let you set up one, so you can't even have a backup.
Email is an okay option. It's better than phone, but it's still not great because email is still unencrypted. So someone who's accessing email servers could see emails flying around, see the codes in them, and use them.
Yep. And SMS is like the worst option.
So Yubikey, I bought the original or one of the very close to the original Yubikey.
So did I.
I was living in Beacon, and at the time, it wasn't actually that useful because not too many things supported it.
I used it for one OAuth service that I used to log into one government account.
I used it for like WordPress, and even though I stopped, my WordPress blogs are still up, even though I haven't used them in forever. But I did like having extra security on them, not because they were particularly worth protecting, but because WordPress is very highly attacked.
Yep.
Right. So I just wanted to put a little extra security on there. But yeah, the YubiKeys that I had those days were not very useful. They didn't use TOTP. They used what's it called, FIDO or whatever, right?
Yep. Now what I did back then is I actually set up,
and they only worked on something that had a USB port, so not a phone.
Yep. I set up a bunch of stuff with my YubiKey to control like access to password vaults and things. Like I did a lot with it back then, like as much as I could, but it wasn't like mainstream. Like I couldn't use it with Google easily.
Right. So now YubiKey is a lot more mainstream, but also, so this is the current YubiKey. This is the YubiKey 5 NFC, whatever. So not only does it USB, right? But it also, in addition to being USB, I don't want to show the back of it. That's what the code is.
Not that would necessarily matter.
Someone could maybe request the same YubiKey from YubiKey if they had the, I don't know. Anyway, the point is, not only does it do all the things the old YubiKey did, but it also works with NFC. So you can just hold your phone near it to get the codes
Now,
out.
older YubiKeys already did that, but in the old days, that didn't work with iPhones. It only worked with Android for Apple reasons that were stupid, and those reasons are all gone. Apple finally fixed the problem.
I think now the newest Apple devices it will work with. It works with iPhones going way back. It worked with my iPhone 7 and my new iPhone 12. It did not work with my iPad that's a couple years old. I think only the newest iPads will do it.
And older iPhones, like iPhones 5, like 6, like it didn't work at all from what I remember.
Yeah, it didn't work then, but that was like 5 years ago.
But the cool thing is if you set this up...
It worked fine, and that's 4 years ago.
Oh, check this out. So in the Google Authenticator app in Android, there's an option to export accounts. It'll create a QR code. You scan it with a different Google Authenticator. It passes the private keys across, and then the old Authenticator stops working and the new one starts working.
All right. Well, the iOS one doesn't have that.
So if you get access to someone's unlocked phone, open up their Google Authenticator and steal their private keys.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. So what the YubiKey does, right, that is so great is that you can, it actually has storage in it, and over NFC, or I guess over USB maybe, but over NFC, you can actually put into the YubiKey up to 32 TOTP private keys. So now, basically, whenever I want to generate codes, I hold my phone near the YubiKey, and then it generates a set of codes for all my apps. And if I don't use the codes, then I have to hold my phone near the thing again.
But what that means, the phone is now just a display. Like if my phone breaks, I can borrow any phone on Earth that has the Yubico Authenticator app, which is free, hold my key up to it, get my code.
Not only that, I can take the YubiKey, which is USB, put it into my desktop computer, which is where it is.
Yep.
And then I can open up the Yubico Authenticator app on my computer and generate codes with a desktop application and copy the codes from that application to my browser to use them. I don't need my phone when I'm at my computer. If I left my phone in the other room, I don't have to go get it.
Yep. Even better. You know what I set up? A bunch of sites support this now, way more than used to, using the key itself directly.
Yes, exactly. You can also, what's it called? What I did is when I was setting up all the keys, I actually bought 2 YubiKeys.
Set it up on both at the same time?
I set it up on both at the same time. So if I lose one YubiKey, I have a backup that has all the codes in it. So
I thought about doing that, but it was kind of a pain with the timing, and I gave up. And I have one YubiKey with everything, but I reset. I just
photographed every QR code twice. That was all I did.
I reset up every one of my backup codes, and those are now secure in a place. And I also took my other YubiKey. I set that up as a key for things that allow multiple keys, and I called it my backup key.
Yeah, I did that also, if there was something like that. I just want to give a sort of thumbs down to Instagram's two-factor, right?
Ooh.
So the Instagram two-factor.
Because I noticed someone was futzing with it, and I assumed it was you.
Of course it's me. So if Instagram, you can only mess with two-factor. You can... Wherever you're logging into Instagram, logging in is just fine. It asks for codes, it asks for backup codes, whatever, right? If you want to set up two-factor authentication on Instagram, you have to disable it and re-enable it. Okay,
a lot of services are like that. It's stupid. There's there's a better way, but whatever.
They'll only let you do it on your phone. They won't let you do it on desktop. If you try to do it on desktop, it says, sorry, you have to do it on your phone. Do it on your...
hate that trend. There are so many things that don't work at all on desktop anymore.
Yep. If you try to do it on your phone in the Instagram app, what it will do when you say, set me up, it won't show you a QR code. It just won't. What it will do is it will look on your phone for the default authenticator app, whatever that happens to be, and launch it and insert the keys into it using the standard API for doing this. And I had like 3 apps, and there's no way to choose the default one necessarily. So I opened up the Microsoft Authenticator app, which I wasn't using anymore. And I was like, no. So I had to delete the Microsoft Authenticator app, get it to open the Google one to put the codes in there, right? If you want to use some other authenticator app besides the one it's going to just launch on its own, it won't show you a QR code to photograph. It will instead show you the literal private key to type in. And it's like, so to put it on, so for me to use the YubiKey with Instagram, I would have had to type in those, like a whole big thing, right? And it didn't tell me like which encryption method it was using for that key. And I like, if I choose the wrong, and there's a lot of choices, they're not just straightforward. So I tried to type it in once and it didn't work. So I clearly made the wrong choice. I made the default choice and that was wrong. So I could not put Instagram onto the YubiKey because their implementation is bad.
That is super annoying.
Yep.
But yeah, so the biggest thing is I did this so that now I am disentangled from my phone in case I like drop my phone and it breaks or something happens.
I'm not completely disentangled. I put the most unimportant apps and also Instagram still on a phone. But I also have a backup phone now, so that's, I'm okay, right? I'm good. I don't know if I reviewed the tiny iPhone, but just briefly, like super briefly.
Oh, apparently Twitch only lets you use Auth specifically.
Yes, Twitch only lets you use Auth specifically. That's also bullshit.
Cold guy pointed that out.
And Twitch is the only thing that it's completely bullshit.
Blizzard is annoying. Blizzard makes you use the Blizzard Authenticator app, and Steam makes you use the Steam Authenticator app.
Blizzard was also one I had a slight hassle with because I haven't even used Battle.net in forever, but I still moved it over.
I haven't logged into Battle.net. Like, I haven't typed a credential in years.
Yeah, I had a little bit of hassle with Blizzard, but I got it done. Steam does make you use their own app, which is bullshit, but it works and it's nice, and I didn't have any hassle with it.
Yep.
So, anyway, so yeah, tiny iPhone. All I want to say is, yeah, it's got a better screen. It looks nicer. It's smaller. It's got a better camera, right? But functionality-wise, it's effectively the same as the iPhone 7, which I still have and still works. So like I could have just kept going with that iPhone 7 until it completely died, and that would have been just fine.
That's what I'm doing with my Sony.
Yeah. I'm not disappointed, though, in this decision. I don't have any regrets because, A, it's good to have a backup phone. Maybe someone else will have their phone broken and need the iPhone 7, which is still perfectly fine. And also, I am hesitant about the rumors on the iPhone 13. So if you're going to buy a phone, it's good to get it. If you're going to buy any technology, it's good to get it as soon as it comes out so you get the most for your money. But this iPhone 12 mini, 100%, I will keep this until it is broken and no longer functioning and such. And plus the fact that it has 5G, I think is going to give it, further life than the.
Yep, that's what I'm lacking. But until COVID calms down, there's no reason. Like 5G doesn't do anything for me. I'm in my house.
Doesn't do anything yet. Yep, not yet.
I'm connected to my FiOS.
Very tiny thing to talk about is I've been using, there's a thing called Ansible, which is an IT automation thing along the lines of like Chef, Puppet, whatever.
Oh yeah, some of my developers have been using that.
And actually, so of all the ones I've tried, this one's just fantastic. Like all the other ones were just a big hassle, hard to figure out how they work, giving me problems. Ansible is just like terrific. It works the way I want it to work, and I'm setting it all up so nice. Maybe we'll do a show on it later, but I love it. So that's my recommendation.
Oh yeah, I'm scrolling through what the configs look like.
If you don't want to just write shell scripts, it's a lot better than writing shell scripts.
I mean, I'm just looking at some config examples, and without knowing anything about actually how it works, the configs are very readable.
It's still stupid YAML, but they actually made a YAML schema that makes perfect sense, and it's real nice. So
I guess I can deal with YAML. Like it doesn't.
I recommend Ansible for products of that nature.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of internet access and 5G and everything, there is some news from Comcast, a terrible ISP, but a lot of people are stuck with them. So I didn't realize they've been enforcing data caps in a lot of places, and now they are expanding to enforce their data caps basically everywhere.
Yeah,
apparently
isn't it a very large data cap. It's like 1.2 terabytes a month or something.
Yep, which I have definitely exceeded 1.2 terabytes in a month many times.
I think even if you were a streamer and a pirater, I don't think you would exceed 1.2 terabytes unless you were hosting your piracy server in your house. And it was a public piracy server. I think even if you had like a private piracy server that you were hosting for your friends, I don't think you would hit 1.2 terabytes a month unless you had 1.2 terabytes of movies and your friend copied your entire server in the month.
Well, I mean,
It's like,
we have a lot
really
of
hard to
I mean,
do
one, we have a lot
1.2
of streaming
terabytes.
devices, and like we're streaming GeekNights all over. It's less now that I into that complicated thing with multiple like
Yeah.
OBS streams. But also the time when I used to like blow past those caps was back in the day when Amazon offered their unlimited cloud service, and I just sent my entire NAS up to the cloud as a snapshot every week because why not?
And
It
I
was
wonder
free.
if the limit applies to upload and download or just one or the other.
It's not super
I
clear
don't know.
there, but
Yep.
it seems to be causing a problem. From what they have a bunch of data in the article about like who exceeds the caps, and apparently like 10% of people are exceeding that cap on a regular basis.
That seems about right. Yeah. I guess it could also happen if, for example, maybe you have a household full of people, right? Plus, first
Yep.
of all, people are home now, so they're using more bandwidth at home. So
Yep.
Comcast bandwidth usage, just like home TP usage, went way up, right?
Oh, here's a
Office
number. The median Comcast ISP usage is 308 gigabytes a month. That's the
about right.
median.
Yeah, that seems like a normal number, right?
seem about right.
1.2 yeah, but the thing is, right? So 300 is like the median, right? So you think 2 people living there. If you've got a household with several people, then you could suddenly start going way up, right?
Yep.
So
If you have
several
4
internet
different
using
people doing 4 different Netflix streams like for 5
Right,
hours
exactly.
every
So
night.
You think the median household is what, like, 2 point something people, maybe 1 point something people in the US? I don't know, right? I'm guessing. But
Or-
so 2 people that
or
are roommates.
Gamers.
Okay,
All right, so here's the biggest one. Remember when we like say 4 of us lived in an apartment in Colony, like the 4 of us who were hanging out somewhere, we're all living somewhere in modern times, and we all buy a new game, and there's an update to that game, and it's 200 gigabytes because it's a big download.
Yep, and you download it 4 times.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying. So like the 300 gigabytes is probably measuring like 1 to 2 normal-ish Netflixy watchy people. If you've got 4 plus big time downloady gamer streamy piratey people, right? That's where you're hitting the 1.2 terabytes. And 10% of people falling into that category, 10% of like Comcast
Yep.
customer accounts falling into that category seems normal, right? 1 in 10 houses.
But it is
has-
interesting because according to this article, the reason they didn't enforce these caps before, they enforced them everywhere except the Northeast, like New York. And the reason they didn't enforce it here was specifically because everyone here has access to FiOS, which is uncapped.
Yep.
Like straight up. Which that's the part that I think is interesting. Comcast basically admitted as part of this whole thing that competition forced them to give better service to people who lived in places with more competition. And now they're saying, fuck it, worse service for everybody. Zoom calls and things like that are also pushing people's bandwidth way up.
They are using a lot.
Think, you've got 2 kids in school. They are on a video call for like 7 hours a day, 5 days a week.
That's true. That is using a significant amount of bandwidth, but Zoom really is giving you low resolution video. Those
That
aren't
is true.
1080p. Those aren't 1080p 60 streams on Zoom, right? Those are like 640 by 480, 30 at maybe 15 frames, right? They're not high quality.
Yep.
That's
So
what
the
you're
article,
right.
you can read this article to see all the details. Like I don't want to dive into it, but there's some interesting points here about how the data caps don't actually protect like the networks in any way. They're solely
not at
for
all.
monetization.
Absolutely.
It does not cost them materially more to
Has that
service
right.
that bandwidth.
Once you have the cable set up, the marginal cost of data moving over the cable is 0. It's not 0. It's the electricity. That's it.
Yep.
Right. The laser, whatever it is.
And this goes back to an original
the
point.
laser is going to be on all day, so it's like it's just a fixed cost basically.
But we've talked about this a lot, and I'm going to keep saying it. Internet access needs to be provided by the U.S. Postal Service in America and be a guaranteed utility.
It doesn't have to be the post office specifically, but it's just like it should be a guaranteed thing, the same way that telephone service was. And
Like a private
electricity
company
is,
could be
and-
allowed to provide an ISP to compete with that, but
Yeah,
the
it could
government
be some
option
sort
should
of
always be
weird-
there.
It just needs to be mandated and regulated the same way that all the other just utilities are. It shouldn't
Yep.
be like this special service you subscribe to, right? The way it is now in the US, at least, is paying an ISP for internet access is no different than paying like Netflix for a subscription.
Yeah, it's a luxury, even though they treat it like a luxury, but it's really a necessity. It's as important as electricity and water in the modern industrialized world.
It needs to be the same as, telephone, electricity, water, etc. And also, by the way, this is not true in the US, but it should be, is that if you fail to pay a water, electric, heating, internet, phone bill.
Yeah, they shouldn't be able to cut it off.
They should never be allowed to cut you off unless the place to which the service is being provided is truly uninhabited. Otherwise, they should not be able to cut you off no matter how much bill you fail to pay.
Yep, there are certain rules around electricity in the US for people where if someone registers that in their house they have like certain kinds of medical equipment, but those protections are few and far between. And for internet, there's nothing.
Yep. I mean, for phones, all there is if you don't pay your phone bill, the phone will still call 911 and nothing else.
Yep. Also, don't forget, a lot of people don't realize this, especially younger people. If you have an old cell phone, it can always call 911, even if there's no SIM card in it.
Any telephone in the United States that is like hooked up in any way, like functioning, right? Plugged into the wall, a cell phone with no SIM card that still powers on properly. If it's a United States phone, in the US, you can call 911 on it no matter what, right? So you can pick up like a $1 flip phone that has 3G on like a Razor or something from, that'll actually be pretty cool to have a flip Razor, right? in 2020. That can call 911 even though it can't call anything else.
You know what I realized though?
Get service for it and call.
When I was migrating my phone, I actually forgot to migrate the SIM card and didn't notice for like 2 weeks because how would I notice?
Yeah, would you? The iPhone. So I don't know if you know this, but when you migrate an iPhone, all you do is hold your old iPhone near your new one, and that's it.
Yep. Actually, so Androids don't like have the same thing by default, but the Sony has one little thing built in that'll do that.
Yeah, but like you turn on a new iPhone, and since when I bought it from Apple, and they already knew who I was. They knew, right? They knew my Verizon account, so they're just like, "Hey, Scott, hold your old iPhone near this new one." All right. And then it just worked. The end. All the apps, everything.
So in some other news, we can't go too deep into it now, but those Apple M1 chips are out, and there's a lot going on there.
Yep. So the all you really need to know, long and short of it, is that the Apple M1 CPU, by all accounts and benchmarks and things we've seen, is up to the hype. It is maybe the best consumer CPU, general purpose CPU available. Period. Right? Short of like maybe some ridiculously overclocked i9s or something.
Yep. With the caveat that is only true, just like the old days with those alpha chips. It's only true if your shit is compiled for them.
Yep. Well, that's true. Of course. Well, no. Well, actually, I saw some benchmarks that were indicating that there were some x86 programs, and not jokey ones, like even Adobe ones, that using Apple's Rosetta 2, right, to emulation API, whatever layer they have to make x86 apps run on the ARM CPU, the chip is so good that they were running faster through Rosetta 2 than they were on native chips.
Now, I saw talk of that too, but I didn't actually read those articles yet, so I wasn't like sure.
The point is it's ridiculously fast. The problem is, as always with Apple, is that the GPU that they give you that's sort of built in is not shabby, and they have, all their fancy metal whatever GPU stuff. Like you can get good graphics going on an Apple computer. It's
even got the neural engine type stuff that like a modern NVIDIA card has.
Yeah, well, I mean that's all built into the CPU even on iPhones, right? But that GPU is still, compared to like an NVIDIA even 2080, like it's not it, right? And the reason is because the ARM CPU that Apple has actually cares about being power efficient, right? They won't want your battery to just die. NVIDIA GPUs, ARM, AMD GPUs, they don't give a shit about power. Look how you have to plug extra power cables into them from your power supply.
If I actually get a 3080, I did the calculation, I have to upgrade the fucking power supply in my computer.
Right. They're basically like hot rods with the engine sticking out the top of the hood. That's why they're so fast, because they're just like, give me that electricity. Vroom, right?
And on one hand, that's fair, because most people do not need that kind of power, and it'd be better if people use less power. But at the same time, it means Apple's will continue to be completely useless for the vast majority of gaming.
If Apple made a computer, right? I don't know why the Mac Pro, they don't just fucking do it. Put the M1 or like M1 Bionic that they'll come out with, of course.
But give me a PCIe slot. Let me just put a real video card in there.
Put a fucking NVIDIA 3080 in there, and that will be the most powerful desktop computer on Earth, no question. And everyone will pretty much have no choice, if they want the powerful computer to do any sort of professional work, to buy that computer. Because Intel, even AMD, which is burning out Intel because Intel's in the deep shit, won't be able to hold any candles to that. I would even maybe have to buy one, and 5 or 6 years from now when I get a computer. So my advice is, there's still hiccups now because it's still, people are still recompiling their software to get it over to ARM and all that, right? The M2, I think, is going to be unbelievable.
Yep. I'm glad that I'm at a point where I can wait, because I spent a lot of money on my workstation years ago.
Right. Your current computer, hold on to it as long as you can. But if your current computer is, right, wait 1 to 2 years to see that M2 CPU come out before you go and buy an Intel or an AMD CPU or something else, right? Because it is probably going to be like, think about the difference between an iPhone 1 and an iPhone 3G. Look at how, the crappy iPod versus like iPod Nano, right? That's the kind of jump we're gonna see here, and the one is already ridiculous.
It has one caveat, but this will not that's important, other than the video card thing. That does not really apply to most people.
The 16 gigs RAM.
Yeah, you cannot have that much RAM.
You can't have more than 16 gigs RAM, and you know why? It's actually sort of a plus and a minus. Right? You can't add more RAM. You're stuck with 16. It's like, okay, 16's enough, but I like having 32. I've had 32 for a long time, right? But why can't you have more than 16? Because they put the 16 gigs of RAM in the damn chip. It's not DIMMs over next to the chip. It's fucking in the CPU. The RAM is in there. It's inside. It's the fastest goddamn RAM you can get. Maybe anywhere, but definitely in a consumer computer. It's sort of unbelievable. Would you rather have twice as much, or would you rather have half as much that's like ridiculously faster?
But there is one thing that it will not be able to do better right now. But this is such an edge case that you probably will probably
more than 16 gigs of RAM at once.
I mean, I use more than 16 gigs of RAM when I'm editing video and doing effects that I can't render in GPU.
Yeah, I'm pretty
like warp stabilizers. Like over a long clip.
I have a feeling if you buy like a Mac.
Well, this is what I wonder. How will extreme high-end rendering stuff work on this compared to like an Intel box with a real GPU?
I'm sure it will be possibly, if not comparable, it might be better. I can't imagine.
I don't know. But if you have...
It could be worse, but if it is worse, it will be slightly worse, not severely worse.
Yep. If you're doing stuff that is usually only the realm of like Wall Street or like weird performance computing, where the task you are doing is bound primarily by number of transactions per second as opposed to any other factor. Like an old Pentium 3 could theoretically outperform this thing for a single-threaded like direct task if you overclocked it, because it maxes out at 3.2 gigahertz. It's not super comparable to like the clock speed of an Intel or an AMD chip because it's a different instruction set. What it can do with one clock tick is different. But if you're doing very discrete, linear, non-parallel things, 3.2 gigahertz is kind of slow, but it's not that much slower. The best an Intel chip's going to do without overclocking it is like 4.5. Like, you're not that much faster.
I mean, but if you're taking advantage of neural engine, how much more efficient is your program? If your program is suddenly like big O N instead of big O, like N log N.
Doesn't the neural engine only apply to the GPU rendering though? I thought that only applied to rendering and GPU stuff.
I'm pretty sure it's for like any sort of like machine learning type thing.
Oh yeah, you could run machine learning stuff on it, or you can use it for rendering, because that's why the 3080 is so big. The 3080 can do AI rendering, or like when the CUDA cores first came out, you could run software that just uses them to do AI stuff directly.
But I mean, pretty much any application that you have that you can map to the neural engine's, functionality.
Just like when early video cards, when we had those CUDA cores, people could write software that would map to CUDA cores and get ridiculous performance.
Yep.
But yeah, this is my point. That point about the clock speeds, but unless you already know that this applies to you, it definitely does not apply to anything you're doing.
Yeah.
And some other really brief news. You might have seen that Twitter, if you're using the regular Twitter app, a bunch of broken, weird stuff appeared at the top that everyone's trying to ignore. Twitter added a feature that basically no one seemed to want, as they keep doing, probably to try to compete with like TikTok or whatever. They basically added ephemeral tweets that they call fleets, that you can fleet something, and 24 hours later it disappears.
Or used a fleet because I don't use the default Twitter app on any platform. I use TweetDeck, Tweetbot.
I installed the regular app again, and I posted one fleet that asked Twitter why they made this harassment-prone, abusive feature instead of just banning the Nazis, and then I uninstalled the client again.
Yep.
So there is a fleet out there that I posted. I guess you can still see it. But I guess I'm not going to go deep into it because it's not super tech news. It's just, Twitter is a company that is in the tech sector, social media, etc. But the thing that bothers me about fleets specifically that you should think about, forget the annoyance of them adding a feature. Like, there's a lot of reasons for that. We can talk about it. The problem is, this is the kind of feature that is extremely prone to abuse. I can make a tweet that adds someone and harasses them, or gets my followers to harass that person, that automatically disappears in 24 hours to cover my tracks. That's how this is going to get used.
Right, of course. But Twitter, like, no one else would be able to see, like, if I harass someone and you don't hear about it for a day, you wouldn't be able to see that I did that. But Twitter would presumably not actually delete them, but just remove them from visibility. And therefore could then still find people who had done harassment.
But they tend not to. And what this means that you can't do is, if you are harassed, it is very hard to prove your case without taking Twitter to court to get that data.
Also, Twitter apparently did have some problems where, yes, you could actually access fleets 24 hours after due to some
I just saw that news. I didn't read the article yet.
Which proves I think they're, like I said, they're not actually deleting them. They're just, basically the SQL query is like select fleets where date time less than 24 hours, right? And they're keeping all the fleets forever in the database. But I think they're going to fix that query, or it's to make it so that through no public facing API can anyone access old fleets, and only internal people can access them.
So last and least, and I have almost nothing to say about this, turns out the GIMP is 25 years old. It had its birthday today.
Well, there's a lot of things with birthdays lately. Mario's 35, right? What else is Microsoft Windows is 35.
So I went and I looked at the GIMP to see like how, because I just use Photoshop since I started paying for Adobe. Like I haven't looked at the GIMP in so long. So I opened it up to see, hey, I know it's been like falling behind commercial tools further and further, but
no, it's real bad.
How bad could it be?
Photoshop.
It is unusable.
Photoshop just added a feature where you can automatically replace the sky in a photo with a different sky.
Photoshop just added a feature where I can take a picture of Scott and tell Photoshop to make him happier and look to the left.
People who are like, I don't need that, whatever, but it's like, you don't understand. There's someone else who does need that, and that's why Photoshop costs that amount of money. If you don't need that, go use junky old GIMP, right? But
even then, all GIMP can do well, like I was trying to use the GIMP a little bit, is you can resize images, and that's pretty much it. It still can't do CMYK.
The vast majority of image editing that people need to do, normal people, on a daily basis,
resize,
crop, resize, filter. And you know what? You don't need to use the GIMP. There's a million little phone apps that do that. There's now Windows, like Windows has the Windows built-in Photos app. It's just called Photos.
It just works.
You can crop, edit, whatever with that little app. You don't need, there is. It's just called Photos on Windows. It's
this sort of
Windows
10. The reason I bring this news up is it brings a culmination, something I've talked about off and on over the years. I haven't talked about this on GeekNights in like a decade, but there was an era when like a bunch of open source desktop applications appeared, like the GIMP, OpenOffice, and at the time, they did most of what the commercial equivalents would do. And as a result, they were, for most people, actually better because they were free.
Exactly. Open Office compared to Microsoft Office at the time was just like, what do I need Microsoft Office for?
But what the GIMP lacks, and what a lot of these open source desktop projects lack, aside from UX, aside from like documentation, aside from like actually thinking about what people want to do, they lacked R&D, and the features that got added to like Photoshop equivalents over the years could not be replicated by the open source community. And this argument that open source tools will be able to like sustain this baseline usage among people didn't really pan out for a lot of sectors.
I mean, you could easily look at features that the professional apps developed and sort of try to copy them.
Which is what these things tended to do, but they got to the point where those features are very difficult to develop.
Right. We've reached the point where it's like, yeah, okay, you want to copy the cropper. We can copy that.
Yep.
You want to copy brushes. Okay, we can copy customizable brushes, and then it's up to the people to make the brushes themselves.
Copy the entirety of the like alpha masking layer stuff that Photoshop does.
Right. Okay, we got to copy the sky replacer. And it's like, who's going to sit there and code the sky replacer, on their own for free, give it away for free, and it's going to work as good as, if not better than the Photoshop one, to the point at which a professional photographer can actually use it?
Yep.
No. Basically anyone who's good enough to code the sky replacer is already working at Adobe.
There are Schusetzer.
Right.
But and like Audacity is a good example of this too. It's pretty good, but yeah, for audio, but even like that, all this open source software, they basically implemented all the relatively easy low-hanging fruit, and they all kind of just stopped getting better.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if open source like desktop applications will ever start progressing again at the rate that commercial software is.
Yeah,
like, Audacity's never going to have a de-reverb that just works, but Adobe Audition literally added a de-reverb function where I can click a button, it removes reverb, it just works, I don't have to do anything. It saves me so much time, it's like magic.
It just costs you money.
But anyway, things of the day. So check this out. I found a channel that is not one I've linked to before, but it's about like civilian, like civic engineering and dams and stuff. And it's about how this particular turbine engine in a particular dam, I think in Austria.
Dropped into it.
Well, we do get to see like someone like starts grinding down the gears on this turbine, but it's the turbine in a dam that is 92% efficient at turning water falling through it into electricity.
Yeah, hydro is really good.
But this is particularly efficient. Even
side effects of hydro are not energy loss and at least not the major ones.
It's environmental destruction in the local area.
Environmental destruction of building a dam and flooding places and unflooding places and fishes and that sort of thing.
Yep. But this video is really cool because it talks about how you get such an extreme amount of efficiency from what is actually a very, very simple physical device. Like this dam is not complicated by any measure.
Nope.
But the reason I'm making this my thing of the day is not because of that. That alone is cool. Like this is the kinds of videos I watch all the time. This is like just my jam. But the reason I make this my thing of the day is about midway through the video, the dude who's explaining it all, like the YouTubey person who was like there in the dam interviewing people, is sitting in a chair about a foot away from the actual spinning turbine. Like just sitting there. Like if he touched it, I just imagine he would be turned into a mist.
Probably, yeah.
And then he turns around and he's very careful, but he holds one of those little light bike generators up to it and holds a light bulb connected to it and touches the spinning thing to this massive turbine for real and lights it up. And I had to I cringed and actually paused the video to figure out if this was an effect or real. He did it. He just sat there and touched this turbine.
Okay.
That is why this video is my thing of the day.
Okay.
So what do you got?
What do I have? So, speaking of Photoshop, here's some photographers that probably use some Photoshop, judging by these images. So what we have here is the 2020 Ocean Photographer of the Year Award
Ooh.
from Oceanographic Magazine, the winners and finalists. So we got we like fishes, you like oceans, right? Here are some really unbelievable photos. I can't believe this is someone's job, basically, is to go to just take photos of the ocean. What do? I'm an ocean photographer. That's my whole job, right? So there's people out there, that's their job. And here is their greatest works of the year. And I think it's something anyone can just really appreciate, unless you are really scared of fish or the sea. I imagine most people will enjoy this, right?
These are some good photos.
Yeah, but it's the kind of, this is the kind of thing where it's like, it's something everyone would enjoy, but it doesn't really go viral and get around, even though it feels like everyone would like it, right? And share it if it got to them. So let's do a little spreading, right?
All right.
Appreciate some ocean photographies.
So, in the meta moment, we're still stuck at home. I have not read more Tale of Genji because I
have not received a message saying that you have read more Tale of Genji. But
nor have I received a message that you have escalated.
No, I have not.
In fact, I started reading another nonfiction book, so...
I've read some comic books.
I'm reading a lot of nonfiction. I did also finish Decadence.
Oh, okay.
It's good stuff.
How about that dense?
Yep, it was Decad. There was a punch at the end, and it was appropriately punchy.
Yeah,
it's a good show. So yeah, follow us, join our Discord. Our forum's been hopping again. Read our GeekNights Code of Conduct. We've updated it. If you have feedback about our Code of Conduct, just check it out in Git. Make some changes. Give us pull requests.
Or just tell us via any means of telling us things. You can also just use any means of telling us things to tell us things, right? You can just our DMs are open, It's email us, YouTube comment us, forum post us.
Yep. Might not respond right away depending on what you say, but
Discord chat us. I'm not working this week, and after this week I'm only working 7 more days this year, and then I will not be working again until January 4th. So you can expect me to be doing something, probably biking. At the very least, I'll be doing more biking to nowhere in my house. And you can watch me do that on my Twitch channel and come talk to me, because if people talk to me, it makes it go a lot faster.
Yeah.
Or at least feel like it's going a lot faster because I'm paying attention to chatting and not to my legs or whatever. So, and that's another way you can DM us. Talk to us.
I also will say this: we did a show recently on.
You can't reach.
We did a show recently on Ricochet, the year 2000 mod to Half-Life. Been playing it off and on the private server that Super Pichu set up.
Yeah, I'm ready for gaming. I am not working. I remind you.
And Ricochet is real fun. And what I've noticed is that when Scott and I play Ricochet, we've only done it a few times so far. One of us will dominate for a while, but then the other one will remember some old strategy or gnosis or gain a skill, and then that person will dominate for a while, and we keep leapfrogging each other and ending up pretty even. It's that game has depth.
I still feel like on the maps that have an upper level, it's get on the upper level alone and
stay there.
People down. It's
when we were playing that big super multiplayer map, it was just the two of us. It was whoever farmed the most. Sometimes I'd finally get up there, and you'd been farming power-ups the whole time, and I get up there and I see just a wave of decapitating ice triple shots fast, just coming at me like a catastrophe. What the fuck do you do?
I stay up there alone, bouncing back and forth, and the power-ups come, and I wait for you to try to. It's if you just stay at the bottom, I'm ahead on score. I don't have to fight you.
But it felt in an anime where there's 2 wizards and they're having a fight, and they have a beam of terrible power just crushing into the middle against each other. That's what it feels like with 2 powered up people in a Ricochet game by themselves.
Yeah, I love it when there's a wave of discs coming at me and a whole big mess, and then I dodge them all with my left-right dodging. It feels like dodging fireballs from Imps and Doom. It's the same dodging.
It is the same dodging. That game is so good.
Right.
So yeah, let's get into it. We have not talked about this topic since April 3rd, 2006. Now, I want to point out, we called this show...
Monday ideas. Send your Monday ideas via any of the DMs, but because our show is so old, it's 15 years old, we can redo show ideas now, and it'll actually be somewhat fresh.
Now, also...
That's what we have to resort to at this point.
So, this one in particular, the news on this day was that Microsoft Virtual Server started supporting Linux.
Ooh.
And also... when we recorded that episode of Geek Nights on that Monday, we mostly explained in the show the difference between CRTs and LCDs. And at the time, I was still using a 21-inch CRT.
Well, CRTs still, even today, have some advantages over.
Yeah. Do you want a really, really high refresh rate?
Even the best OLED, LCD displays are still not as, good in some ways as a CRT is.
Yeah,
That's
do you
really,
want effectively
really good
zero
CRT.
latency and an extremely high refresh rate? A CRT
That's
still
why
can't be beat.
You still see Smash Brothers players, right, using the CRT, right? Because, that's what you got to do.
But
yeah,
that space has changed a lot. Smart TVs appeared, e-ink appeared. There's a whole world. I'm looking at 2 4K monitors right now.
Yep, OLEDs are a thing. We've got, and the thing is, it's not just monitors, right? You've got displays on all kinds of devices with all kinds of different properties and things to choose from. So it's just like a whole new world. So I guess I'll start with the most frequently used display by most people, which is the television. And what's really happened with the television is you got LCDs, but the OLED TV is like the king. And the thing with an OLED that's different from an LCD is it's sort of the same thing, right? The difference is that an LCD is a screen with pixels, and the pixels change color. And the light is a light that's separate that shines through from the back, and then you can see the colors in the pixels.
Yep,
right?
and the pixels do like crystals basically move to change the polarization. But
Exactly.
they're only modifying the light that's coming through from that backlight.
Exactly. So the early LCD screens would have like a couple lights, usually like at the bottom and top, like light bulbs, and they would die or they would dim, or you'd have some parts of the screen being brighter than others, and they had all problems. Now, when you see someone saying like you've got an LED TV, an LED TV is just an LCD with a grid of LEDs behind the LCD screen to light it evenly with lower power. It's a thinner screen, it's better, but it's just better lights than just light bulbs, right? So then came along the OLED. So the OLED is an organic LED, and what this is really unbelievable. Each pixel is self-illuminating, right? The pixels light themselves up. And what this means is that the contrast ratio on an OLED screen is unbelievable, because a black pixel is fucking black. It turns its light off, right? And you just can't see. It's like, so on a screen that has just a light shining behind it at all times, right? Even the black pixels are still kind of gray because there's light shining through them, right? And it can't block all the light with like a lead shield. It's just a crystal or whatever. So an OLED screen, the difference between the lit up parts and the dark parts, the contrast ratio is so high. It's really, really beautiful. But the problem with OLED screens is they are expensive. They cost a lot. Even today, they cost a lot of fucking money.
Yep.
And the reason they cost so much money is because when they try to make them at the factory, the yields are low. And what that means is when the factory spits out 5 screens or whatever, some number of screens, maybe 10 screens, a percentage of those screens do not pass QA. Like they're busted or the pixels are messed up. They're not good enough to actually sell to anybody. And they have to recycle them or try again or throw them out or whatever. So when you buy a working OLED screen with all its pixels in good shape, you're paying for a bunch of broken ones as well. And that's where all your money went. So that's a thing.
Yep. And now we've also, on top of that, we've got do you get a 1080p or a 4K? Now, TVs, a 4K TV is really not useful to people yet, unless you have an HTPC plugged in.
Yep.
And you're using it as a PC.
And you might be watching those 4K programs a lot, right? So if the things you're watching a lot happen to be in 4K a lot, maybe you've got, you're just super movie person. You're buying those ultra Blu-rays that have 4K movies, or the sports you're watching are like NFL broadcasts are in 4K or something, right? Then, Super Bowl is probably available in 4K too, right? Then maybe you should get it, right? The HTPC obviously can do 4K, but like, I don't think the newest consoles, the PS5 doesn't do 4K, I don't think, right? Does it?
I don't think so. No, I mean, most people don't even run their computers at 4K, even if they can.
PS5 4K resolution guide. Let's see. It seems like it can do it to some extent, but how many games?
Yeah, how many games, even if it's outputting 4K, I feel like it's upscaling as opposed to rendering in 4K.
Just a experience flickering. All right.
I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know. But when I play
yeah,
Overwatch on my computer with my 4K monitor, I'm actually rendering in 4K.
Yep, the PS5 does support 4K 120 hertz video output. So if you got a PS5, then maybe a 4K TV is a good idea.
Maybe?
Maybe. All right. It supports it to some extent, and I bet it can play those fancy Blu-rays, the upgrade Ultra Blu-ray. Not that I would ever buy a physical media ever again in my life, but it probably can play those. I'm guessing. So yeah, the final thing with TVs that's happened since 2006 is pretty much the smart TV has come to dominate. And so
this is a problem.
This is bad, right? So you want to go and buy a TV, and like us, you have no intention of using any of that smart TV bullshit because, A, if you let the smart TV connect to the internet, right, you are just asking for a world of problems, right? This is the thing that has happened is because the software that I've seen a lot of smart TVs are basically just Android phones in the TV. That's what they are, a lot of them. And that software is never getting updated and it's easily exploited. So your TV, which eventually stops getting updates, eventually gets hacked. And now you've got a TV in your house that's spamming emails to someone or who knows what it's doing, malwaring, attacking, using up your bandwidth that is limited by Comcast, right? Who knows what the hell that thing's doing. And also, the functionality of even the best smart TVs with the best UIs is basically crap compared to even things I don't like the Roku.
Yep, the UIs tend to be really unresponsive. Like even on fancy, expensive OLED TVs, you'd be surprised how slowly they respond to commands.
Yeah,
and
I mean, if you've got the PS5, what do you know, or a HTPC or a Roku or anything, a Chromecast, an Apple TV, all of those, even though HTPC is the one true master, whatever, the best one of all those, the smart TV loses to everything.
Well, like the apps, a lot of times the apps will just I remember way back when people were using the Netflix apps that were built into, or the YouTube apps in particular that were built into their TVs. Those YouTube apps would one, not block ads, two, didn't really work the way YouTube normally works, and three, certain videos that were flagged with certain monetization settings would not show up. You could not watch them because that was not treated like just a browser. All sorts of nonsense would happen. And that's on top of all these security concerns and the inability to update them or even to understand in some cases what they're doing.
Yep. So the problem is you want to buy a TV that's not smart. There aren't a lot to choose from. There are some, but not many, and they're not necessarily the best displays. So what you can do is either A, you can buy a smart TV and just not plug it into the internet and not use any of the smart stuff. Just use it as a screen and try to ignore the smart part as much as possible.
Yep.
The smart part quotes. Or you can buy, there are people selling large monitors, right? So they're computer monitors that are just large. Like Alienware has a 55-inch monitor that's 4K. That's actually pretty impressive looking monitor. But, it has some limitations, mostly the price. It's real expensive, but it does look pretty nice, I gotta say, even if you're not gaming or whatever. So there are some options out there for giant monitor or dumb TV, but I think for reasonable in terms of saving money, I think the option today that's available is just smart TV, turn off all the smart stuff as much as possible, don't plug it in. Just power and HDMI and that's it.
Yep. And as much as I want a dumb TV, like a TV that just doesn't do anything fancy, I feel like that ship is sailing right now because what's driving these smart TVs? When you really think about it, it is that TVs are really commoditized to most people. They just want a TV that works. When they buy one, it's not like they're going to replace it until it breaks in most cases.
Until they get a bigger one, they get enough money to buy a bigger one because they're
but once you get a big enough TV, you can get a gigantic TV real cheap if you get an old LCD.
There's still a whole culture of people who are just oh, look at my new big TV. It's like a dick measuring contest, right? Or it's
but I think that ran out when you can for $400 literally get a 72-inch TV and just
I
put it on
think
your
there
wall.
are actually a lot of people buying. There are people who don't because you're not bragging to your friends it's they don't understand if you're not tech people, right? Oh, it's OLED, high contrast ratio, HDR, but 77 inches. So there's a lot of TVs out there.
I don't know. I feel like that changed. Even when I was in high school, I remember people wouldn't there was an era where people would talk about my big TV, but once flat panels started appearing, they talked more about the technology. Like the people who had a plasma TV would never shut up about their plasma TV.
That's true. Anyway,
Even if they were
But
still
yeah.
outputting SD like crap to it.
Plasma's dead, by the way. Rip,
Yeah.
rip plasma.
R.I.P.
So yeah, that's the deal with TVs. So what about monitors, right? So monitors these days, they got 4K monitors out there. The best monitor you can buy is the Apple monitor. It's unbelievable. It only works with Apple things, and it costs $1 million, $1 zillion. So don't buy it unless you won the lottery yesterday and you have Apple computers. Right?
Yep, pretty much.
But it's really smart. Like, remember I was talking about how there were like lights behind the LCD screen? It has a grid of lights and it dims and brightens them dynamically as the images on the screen change. No other screen I'm aware of for consumers does that. It's ridiculous. So you're not an Apple person who has $1 million. What monitor are you going to buy?
Now, I think for normal computer usage, if you use a work, like laptops just have a monitor, like whatever. But if you're buying a desktop monitor, you pretty much want to get a 4K unless you have a specific reason not to in the modern era.
So there's a few things that have developed, right? So you've got the 4K versus the not HD. There's even some 2K monitors out there, which are higher resolution than 1080p. But you know what? Most monitors now, it's really hard to get an aspect ratio that's not 16:9.
Which I'm mad about, but you know what? I had to let that sail. Like, as much as I honestly, my whole life, have, since it appeared, have preferred 16:10, I still think it's a better form factor for what I do with computers. I ship sailed. I gave up. I can't. There's no way. 16:10 still exists, but they're expensive and weird.
No one's making them really.
Yep.
So here's the things you have to worry about. The first thing you have to worry about is, do you need that higher resolution, and is your computer strong enough?
Yep. A lot of people do not have a computer that can drive 4K. In fact, if you don't have a dedicated GPU, your computer probably cannot display at 4K without either really lowering the refresh rate, if at all.
The 1070 can have 2 4K monitors, and then it is at its absolute limit. I cannot add a single extra pixel. I couldn't have two 4K monitors and a 640 by 480 monitor. That wouldn't work.
Yep.
It's like that's the limit of pixels it can render at once.
If you're a gamer and you put your games to be in 4K, they will look beautiful. However, they use massive amounts of GPU power. Like, I don't think
4K is 4 times 1080p. That's like having it's 4 times as many pixels. So if you were running at 1080p 80 frames a second, you're probably going down closer to 20.
Yep.
Right?
So I'll give you an example. My current computer, my like Super Beast with its 1080 and like all the nonsense in it, my workstation, when I played Overwatch before I got a 4K monitor, I rendered it at 1080p. It was just locked at 120 FPS all the time, perfect. Didn't even like get hot. Like the GPU was like barely above idle. When I got the 4K monitor, my GPU is running like at 80%. The room gets hot. All the fans spin up, and I'm locked at 60 FPS. But it looks, it is so. I remember you came over right after I'd gotten those monitors. We were into auto chess, and you were like, we were talking about auto chess, and I started playing, and you were like, why does it look so good on your computer? And you were like, really? And then you realized, oh, 4K. Oh.
Yeah, monitors matter a lot more than graphic card. Okay, so that's the first thing, resolution, right? Next thing, colors, right? So if you're doing Photoshop-y video type work, print type work, you're an artist of some kind, you need a monitor with accurate color display, right? You'd be surprised. You could take the same JPEG in the same app with the same settings, like clean Windows install, right? And open that JPEG on 2 different monitors, same computer, right? Just drag the window back and forth between the monitors, right? And you'll see the colors change completely because one monitor is better, has a higher range of colors it can display in the gamut, and is just better at color accuracy, or is more well calibrated, or whatever. So if it matters to you, then you need the monitors that have extreme color accuracy cost a lot of money. There's basically 3 tiers, generally speaking. There's ridiculous accuracy, which is like 100% sRGB plus even like Adobe, and that's only
like you use one of those peripherals to calibrate it, like after you set it up.
Monitors cost thousands of dollars. We would use them at like Pixar or something.
I don't even use one of those.
Yeah, you need that. Then there's like the $500 monitor range. This is what I'm talking about.
Like the Dell Ultra Sharp is a good example of that range we're talking about now.
$500, 99% sRGB. Almost everything you see on your desktop computer is sRGB color, scheme, gamut, whatever, right? So you can see 99% of the colors very accurately. It's going to be great. Then you've got don't care about colors monitors, which is all those ones that you see on Newegg or whatever during Black Friday, which is coming up, right? It's like, oh my God, what a deal on a monitor, $100, 27 inches. Oh, I'm getting this. Yeah, because the colors on it, they just don't give a shit, right? You're who knows what you're seeing on there. So those are your color things. Okay, something else important these days. I have learned the details about this, right? G-Sync, Freesync, right?
Oh, yeah.
What is the deal with that? So here's the deal. You, in the olden days, right, would have a game, and the game would run at X FPS, and your monitor can only render so many frames a second. It's a 60 hertz monitor. It's a 144 hertz monitor, right? Obviously, if you're gaming, higher hertz is better, right? Because if you're no point in rendering 100 FPS if you only got a 60 hertz monitor. You're throwing away 40 frames, never to be seen.
Yep. Gamers will make a weird argument that is pretty much nonsense. So
right. But hey, you can buy 144 hertz monitor now. You can buy even more than that, right?
Yeah.
And
I can't render 4K at 144 hertz, just saying.
But someone who's got a 3080 maybe can. Probably could, right? Who knows? But yeah, if you've got the power, you can do it. Damn, that's some stuff. But here's the problem. There's a setting. Pretty much every video game has a setting. Vertical sync. What does that mean? That means when you set vertical sync, you're telling the GPU, hey, my monitor is 60 hertz. I want you to render 60 frames, and we're going to be in sync with each other. Render a frame, show the frame. Render a frame, show the frame. Render a frame, show the frame. If you don't set that setting, what can happen is something I saw as recently as Star Wars Squadrons, which is sort of this screen tearing effect where the computer is drawn half the current frame to the screen, and it's about halfway through, so it's in the middle of the screen drawing pixels, and suddenly the next frame gets swapped in the frame buffer, and so frame 1 is on the top half of the screen and frame 2 is on the bottom half of the screen, and they don't line up, and you see sort of this horizontal line across the screen, and it's sort of awkward. So the way we solved that was vertical sync, right? Render the frames on time with each other. What the hell is G-Sync then? If we have vertical sync, right, why the hell do you need G-Sync? Well, what if you can't render 60 FPS? What if you've got a 144 hertz monitor, but you can't render 144 frames? What if you can do more than 144 frame, whatever? What this does is it basically says, hey, GPU, you're going to render all the frames you can, right? Just, don't care about what the monitor is doing. Don't try to stay in sync with the monitor. And the monitor is going to display the frames properly in sync, right? So that effect doesn't happen. Every frame is going to start at the top and end at the bottom. So NVIDIA, just to not go into extreme detail, NVIDIA does this in a very fancy way with lots of extra fancy features that are really kind of nice. But it does it by having an actual CPU in the monitor to do the extra work. And that's why G-Sync monitors are expensive, because they have extra hardware in the monitor to gain these extra features that are kind of nice if you can afford them. The Freesync, what AMD does, Freesync has less features than G-Sync. It is not as high spec, right? It doesn't do all the fancy things. It just does the basics of synchronizing. But the monitors are less expensive because they don't need that fancy extra CPU in the monitor. So you can just get a Freesync monitor and get most of the benefits, but not all the benefits. You can, however, you'll see some G-Sync compatible monitors, which are usually Freesync monitors. So you got an NVIDIA GPU, but you got an AMD Freesync monitor. You can get the benefits of the AMD one because the NVIDIA one sort of encompasses all that and more. You're just sort of telling the NVIDIA GPU, hey, don't do the extra stuff because the monitor doesn't have the CPU in it. So that's what that is. It's only important if you're gaming and such, and you got extra money for the monitor.
Yep, and I do not have that because I actually got my monitors a while ago when I built the new computer.
My plan actually is when I eventually do get new monitors, whenever the hell that is, could be a year from now.
Well, you've got one of my old monitors right now.
I'm going to get one monitor that doesn't care about frame rate. That's all about color, right? Like a $500 color fancy monitor. And then a second monitor that's the gaming monitor with the FreeSync, G-Sync, right? Not caring about color so much, getting the high frame rates, 144 or more. And hopefully both of them will be 4K, and
Yep.
that'll be the limit of my GPU.
Now, for me, in terms of screen size, I actually 27 inches feels like the sweet spot for like desktop, like the kind of work that I do.
24, 27, I think is the, see 24, but I have 16 by 10. If it's 27, then it can be 16 by 9.
Yeah.
It's like, but bigger than that, it's like, that's a television. That doesn't go on my, I see people who got these televisions on their desk. It's like, no, what are you doing, man?
Yeah.
That is not right unless you've got eye problems or some other reason that makes sense.
Yep. Now, one thing to think about too is one of the real benefits of 4K on the desktop, like when you go to 4K outside of gaming, where if you don't have a great GPU, you can still tell your games to render in 1080p. That's what I do for Star Wars, actually.
Yep. I do that for some games, yeah.
Yep. But text will be surprisingly legible at very small physical sizes with a 4K monitor. If you've never used one, that is the thing you might not realize, that you might think, oh, my text will all be tiny, but it'll be crystal clear when it's tiny.
Yep.
And Windows, at least, like, it used to not work that great, but like high resolution monitors used to have a lot of problems on Windows. But that's pretty much all gone now. And you can set the scaling factor in Windows. A lot of people don't think to do this. And you can set it to like 125 or 150%, where you still want your computer to output to your monitor at its native resolution. Very rarely do you want to output at any other resolution. You can theoretically do like a perfect half or quarter, but that's not an ideal solution. You're better off always sending data to your monitor at its native resolution. So 3840 by like 2160. And then tell Windows to scale up all the like interface stuff by 50%. So text will be a little bigger.
All right. My resolution's twice as high, make my icons twice as big, make my text font, my text size twice as big.
Yep.
Right? It's like, oh, and now everything looks great.
Yeah, and that really just comes down to how are your eyes, how are you using the computer. I've seen some people that they have the big TV monitor because they sit pretty far away from it, the way they've set up their desk.
That could work.
Yep.
But yeah,
I'm personally I'm a fan of the Dell UltraSharp like U2718Q if you want a cheap, pretty color correct monitor today.
Because this applies to the TVs and the monitors, just how many connectors are on there, right? It's like if you're not a nerd, you probably don't care. You just need
Oh yeah, we should talk about this really briefly. I think we talked about it before. Modern TVs still just HDMI, that's it. But monitors take DisplayPort. Do not buy generic DisplayPort cables for reasons I don't want to get into. You can Google it. Most DisplayPort cables, especially if they're generic or cheap, will have wires in them that are not supposed to be there that will literally fry either your GPU or your monitor or both, possibly. Like, just go read about DisplayPort cables and do not buy like Amazon generic or whatever. You'll have a problem.
Okay, I wanted to talk about displays and like phones, tablets, and that sort of thing. We'll talk about a little bit, I guess, because we're going long. But basically, yeah, most of the phones these days have, the same sort of thing that's going on with monitors. They're like really high resolution screens. A lot of all the best ones are OLEDs, because even though those OLEDs are expensive on the TV side, they're still expensive on the phone side, but they're so much smaller that, and they can make more. It's easy to make a smaller one, right? It doesn't cost as much as a giant one. It's like, this new iPhone has like a, super amazing OLED screen in it. It's like unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
Some of the Android phones have super high refresh rate screens, like some of the Samsung Galaxy ones, and that's pretty nice too. I think the iPhone refresh rate is actually maybe the one area it's still behind in terms of, I guess they didn't feel the need. They're like, they were like, why? I don't know.
I mean, I'm good with like a 720p cell phone because I'm not really watching video on it.
Maybe it saves battery to have a lower refresh rate on the screen. I don't know. But yeah, that's what's going on there. It's still OLEDs, regular LEDs, that sort of thing. It's the same technology that we were just talking about, only smaller. There are all sorts of other display technologies.
Like e-ink.
Yeah, like e-inks and those sorts of things. Old IPS screens, these older technologies, they've been around a long time, but miniaturization has happened. So you see a lot in the hacking, modding communities. Like you can buy now an e-ink display of many varieties to go with a Raspberry Pi, and it's like any shape, size, sets of colors, different properties. So, there's like so many choices at reasonable prices. There are IPS screens, like old, tiny LCDs. I put one in my Game Boy Advance, right? It's unbelievable, this screen that you can put in there. So for handheld portable devices, like the kinds of screens you can just buy a screen like to mod into your project, the choices now are really like you're basically getting like best possible monitor from 10 years ago in a really tiny space now. Like choose your resolution, choose your size. Low power, right? Super bright, super nice colors. They might not be accurate colors, but they'll be nice looking, right? Way better than what else you're gonna get at that size. So there's a lot of activity going on in that realm, even though that's not the highest end realm of displays that people think about the most, which is, televisions, monitors. There's still a lot of activity happening in the tiny display zone in terms of using older technologies, better, smaller.
Yep. I still think there's a lot of cool uses for e-ink that are just around the corner because it uses so little power.
Yep, because it only refreshes when you need to refresh it. And they've got some that are like partial refresh where you're like, okay, you're reading you got an ebook reader, right? It's like, okay, you've got your words here and the top left is a clock. So, okay, we're not going to redraw the screen every second or every minute because the clock is on the screen. We'll just refresh the tiny part of the screen that has the clock on it only, right? And then if you turn the page, okay, we'll refresh the whole screen now, right? And save a lot of power that way. It's real nice.
Yeah, but the cool thing is, if you're in the market to buy a new monitor, at least, if you don't need something very specific and fancy, you can get real good 4K monitors for pretty cheap. Like, they're not going to be super color correct. They might only have a 60 frame refresh rate, 60 hertz, but they're way better than an LCD you would have gotten even 5-6 years ago.
I remember the one thing I forgot to talk about that we can end on this. Right?
All right.
There's a couple trends that are going on in monitor realm that we haven't talked about. The first trend is the curved display trend.
I am theoretically a fan of that, but every curved display I've seen is a really low resolution screen.
I agree. I've seen curved resolution displays, especially at PAX, as like demo machines. And the curve, it's like you think it's a gimmick, but it's actually kind of nice. Like,
it's real nice if your monitor's big, like 27-inch or bigger. Like, that's real nice.
Like, there's something to it. Like, it's like you sit in front of the curved screen, and it's like, it doesn't feel like awkward at all. It's like it actually, is sort of like easier. It just, I don't know if there's like a science behind it, but it's sort of one of those things where it's like it could just be BS. It could just be psychological. Where it's like, oh, yes, my split keyboard in my Dvorak layout is better. It feels better. I can't explain it. There's no science behind it, right? The curved monitor is the same way, where it's like, it just feels nice. Like you stand in front of them and it just like feels nice the way like a nicer carpet just feels nicer than a rough carpet, right? There's something there. The second trend that's going on in monitor land is the combined monitors, right? Where you'll get a display that is mega big, like instead of being 1920 by 1080, what's 1920 times 2? Like 4,000?
Yep. But it's not like two separate monitors. It basically like you're almost outputting two different monitors to one physical device.
Sometimes you do have to plug in like 2 HDMI cables, but it's basically one big ass screen or one package that has secretly 2 screens in it, but in the middle, they're just right next to each other, literally next to each other. So it might as well be one extra wide screen or sometimes even extra tall. I've seen screens where it's like, yeah, it's extra big, but you're actually splitting up this one, what looks to you to be one screen, splitting it up 4 ways, plug in 4 HDMI cables and show 4 different things. Rather than buying 4 monitors, you buy one giant monitor and show 4 things on it. Like a video wall almost.
Yep.
Right?
Now, on one hand, I can see a time and a place for that kind of thing, but most of the ones I've seen are also actually either pretty low resolution or have a lot of weird drawbacks. The other problem is if you don't live somewhere where you can have a big spacious desk, that might not fit anywhere. Like, I could not put a monitor like that on this desk.
Well, it's like, and also just my personal workflow, right? Having one, even if I could just combine both of my monitors into one monitor, that was, I guess, what I have 1920 by 1200 now times 2.
Well, like if it's one big monitor and you tell a game to go full screen, a lot of games do not have that aspect ratio, and there's all sorts of fuck-ups that happen. Or like you're playing a Counter-Strike on like half of a monitor, and that just feels weird.
Yeah, so 3840 by 1200, it's like that's actually worse for me to combine these 2 screens. Like I keep something on the right and something on the left, and they're separated, right? So putting them in one screen, the major benefit is really a few applications like games that will spread their way across, right? It's like Star Wars could be pretty good if you're not doing VR. If you
Yeah.
do it on the big wide screen, that could be pretty nice, right? It's extra wide. You see a lot to the left, a lot to the right. Maybe an FPS could be really nice if it spreads its way across both screens like that. But so few applications do that. It's like it makes a really good demo, but I think it's only a good purchase if you are frequent. Like your game is a game. Like your life is focused on a game, and that game supports that or something, right? Or you primarily most of the time use an application that supports that giant wide screen. One application across both, right? If you're doing two screens with one application left, one on the right, don't buy the big wide, mega screen. It's kind of silly, right?
Yep.
But it is a thing, and it exists, and it has uses. But you make sacrifices in other areas for that, at least right now. And that's that. So, 2020 screen update.
Yep. And if you want to listen to what this was like in 2006, I'll link to that episode. You'll hear us talk a lot about CRTs versus these newfangled early LCDs.
All right, so we're allowed to do this show again in 2034.
All right. Hopefully by then it's either just like, well, I've got the eye implant, and I got the synchronized eye implant, but I got the asynchronous one.
I'm waiting for eye implant 2.0. Okay.
All right.
File export multi. Oh no, there was a problem saving the metadata.
Oh God, we had a lot of people.